Matt Walsh thought he could dominate the conversation. He walked into the CNN studio certain that his sharp tongue, biting ideology, and relentless confidence would be more than enough to flatten a man he saw as soft. A man of faith, not of fight. But what happened next left the conservative firebrand speechless and set the stage for one of the most unexpected and humbling moments in modern political television. The room buzzed with tension as two men from radically different worlds prepared to face off. On one side sat Matt Walsh, 38, conservative commentator, author, and cultural crusader, arms folded, voice already rehearsing jabs beneath his breath. On the other side, quiet, steady, sat Jonathan Roumie, 50, best known for his portrayal of Jesus on The Chosen, but now stepping into a very real and very public moral confrontation. He wasn't there to win a fight, he was there to tell the truth. What was supposed to be a routine policy debate was about to become something else entirely. A lesson in stillness under fire, a reminder that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it listens and waits. Matt Walsh came prepared with the usual attacks, labeling progressives as weak, faith as irrelevant, and any form of compassion as dangerous idealism. But Roumie had been watching, listening, praying, and when the red lights blinked on and the cameras rolled, Jonathan Roumie didn't speak first. He simply smiled, not arrogantly, but with the quiet resolve of someone who had already decided not to fight fire with fire, but to let truth speak for itself. Within minutes, everything began to shift. This wasn't just going to be another cable news argument. This was going to be a reckoning. One man armed with anger, the other anchored in something much deeper, but not in the way Matt Walsh expected. The moderator introduced both men. The camera zoomed in. Across the country, millions of viewers settled in expecting another fiery exchange, a battle of slogans and sound bites. They had no idea they were about to witness one of the most spiritually piercing moments in modern televised debate. As expected, the opening question was on federal spending, a topic Walsh had weaponized in countless speeches and articles. With a smug grin and a rehearsed cadence, he launched into his opening attack. "You know," he began, voice dripping with disdain, "it's almost comical hearing people like Mr. Roumie here talk about responsibility, fiscal or otherwise. These soft-hearted dreamers come to the national stage with utopian visions and zero experience making tough decisions. They've never had to run a business, balance a budget, or say no when it actually mattered." He leaned back confidently in his chair, the smirk never leaving his face. The studio audience, stacked with supporters, chuckled and nodded along. Walsh had done this before. He knew the script. He was hitting every beat of his culture war performance. Mock the idealist, or call him naive. Assert yourself as the adult in the room. "I've spent years telling hard truths," Walsh continued, "about government waste, about personal responsibility, about real-world consequences. And now we've got a generation of influencers and actors trying to redefine sacrifice into slogans. It's embarrassing." Cameras captured every hand gesture, every smirk. Walsh was in his element, loud, direct, aggressive. And yet, across from him, Jonathan Roumie didn't flinch. He didn't interrupt. He didn't scoff. He just listened. A gentle half-smile formed at the edge of Roumie's mouth. He wasn't taking notes. He wasn't strategizing. He was waiting. Like a priest listening to confession. Like someone who knew that what was coming next wouldn't require force, just light. When the moderator turned to him, Roumie folded his hands and spoke with a tone so calm it was almost disarming. "Matt," he said softly, "I appreciate your passion, and I hear your frustration. Responsibility matters. Accountability matters. I think we agree on that much." There was something in his voice, not combative, not political, almost pastoral, but there was also something underneath it, weight, intent. Walsh, mistaking gentleness for weakness, leaned forward. "Then let's talk about responsibility," he snapped. "Because I've had to make real choices, real sacrifices, not speeches, not photo ops, real leadership." He gestured dismissively at Roumie. "You get applause from soft audiences for saying nice things. I've taken bullets for saying hard ones." The audience reacted with mild applause. Walsh thought he was winning, but Roumie's expression didn't change. His response came not as a counterattack, but a quiet unveiling. "I'm glad you brought up responsibility," Roumie replied, "because I've taken the time to understand yours." Now it was Walsh's turn to stiffen slightly. "I've looked at what you've said over the years about spending, sacrifice, leadership, And I noticed something important. There was no raised voice, no dramatic pause, just a steady hand pulling back the curtain. You speak often of sacrifice, Roumie said gently, but you've built a career profiting from outrage. You say we should spend wisely, and yet support policies that funnel billions into fear campaigns while slashing food assistance for children. You say we need hard choices, but only when those choices fall hardest on people with the least. The studio grew quiet. Walsh's smile had started to fade. Roumie's voice remained calm, but now carried a quiet authority. I'm not here to embarrass you, he said. I'm here to ask, not with anger, but with conviction. When did compassion become weakness? When did love for neighbor become something to mock? When did protecting the vulnerable start sounding like socialism to you? Walsh opened his mouth, but said nothing. The audience, once chuckling, now watched in stillness. The trap had been set, not by sarcasm, not by spin, but by truth wrapped in humility. And Matt Walsh had walked right into it. Matt Walsh had backed himself into a corner. And Jonathan Roumie was about to reveal just how costly that corner would become. The trap had been set, not with aggression, but with patience. Now it was time to let the light in. What happened next would be remembered not as a shouting match, but as a moral cross-examination, a dismantling not through insults, but integrity. Matt, Roumie began, his voice steady but firmer now. I'm grateful you brought up your commitment to responsibility, fiscal, moral, civic, because I think the people watching would benefit from seeing what that commitment looks like when we hold it up to the light. Walsh nodded, unaware. Still confident, Roumie glanced down, folded his notes slowly, and continued. Let's start with something you've supported repeatedly. The $398 million earmark for a bridge in Alaska, known nationally as the Bridge to Nowhere. You defended it as essential infrastructure, despite it connecting a town of less than 9,000 to an island with just 50 residents. Is that what responsibility looks like? Walsh blinked, his jaw tensed. That's a complicated issue, he muttered. Roumie's tone didn't change. Let's help make it simple, he replied, lifting a document gently in his hand. Here's your public statement from 2006. You called the bridge essential for development, but when national backlash grew and your political allies distanced themselves, you reversed your stance and claimed credit for opposing it. He looked up, calm, direct. So, were you responsible when you supported spending $398 million of taxpayer money on a vanity project? Or were you responsible when you abandoned it to protect your reputation? The room fell still. The audience, the cameras, even the moderator held their breath. Walsh's mouth opened slightly. Nothing came out. Roumie didn't raise his voice. He didn't press. He just revealed. But let's go deeper, Roumie continued, his eyes still locked on Walsh's. In just over 2 years, during your public advocacy for small government, the operating budgets you endorsed increased by more than 30%. That number landed like a thunderclap. Walsh sat frozen. And yet, Roumie continued gently, you've spent this entire evening accusing others of reckless spending, of immaturity, irresponsibility, even moral weakness. But when faced with the consequences of your own record, you resigned and left the mess behind. A murmur passed through the crowd. Walsh shifted uncomfortably. You speak of leadership, Roumie said, but leadership means staying when things get hard, not walking away and rebranding it as courage. Walsh attempted a counter. You're taking these out of context. Alaska had unique circumstances. Oh, Alaska had unique circumstances? Roumie asked, almost kindly. But the rest of the country doesn't? He let the question linger. You justify your own spending with context. But when it comes to healthcare, to education, and to the needs of millions, suddenly context doesn't matter? Walsh stared forward, now visibly cornered. Roumie took a breath and then delivered the final blow. Not cruelly, but with surgical clarity. And after all that, you left public service and signed a book deal, a speaking tour, a podcast. You walked away from governing, but not from profiting off it. And tonight, you came here to lecture others about responsibility. Silence. You didn't just contradict yourself, Matt, Roumie said gently. You sold the idea of principle while practicing convenience. The audience, once reactive, now sat stunned. They weren't witnessing a debate. They were witnessing a reckoning. Roumie leaned back in his chair, peaceful. The storm had passed, and it hadn't come from him. It had come from the weight of truth, calmly spoken. And Matt Walsh had no refuge left to hide in. Matt, Roumie said gently with finality in his voice, There's one more thing I believe our viewers deserve to know about your idea of public responsibility. His eyes didn't narrow, his voice didn't sharpen, but the authority in his tone made the moment feel sacred and irreversible. You've spent this evening accusing others of lacking commitment to public service, of not understanding sacrifice, but after endorsing reckless spending, after walking away from your own responsibilities, you signed a multi-million-dollar media deal. He paused. You left public advocacy behind for fame, for a reality show, for book tours and stage lights. And now you sit here wagging a finger at others about discipline and duty. The words fell like quiet thunder. The final blow had been delivered. Matt Walsh froze, stunned. His entire persona, built on the image of a tough, talking truth-teller, crumbled under the weight of one undeniable truth. He had sold conviction for convenience, and now the mirror refused to turn away. Jonathan Roumie hadn't humiliated him. He had unveiled him, using only Walsh's own choices. The studio was silent. Gone were the smug grins, the snickers, the nods of agreement. Even Walsh's own supporters in the crowd looked away, unsure where to anchor their loyalty. The moderator, sensing what had just occurred, finally asked, "Mr. Walsh, would you like to respond?" Walsh looked around like a man lost in his own echo chamber, eyes darting for a lifeline that no longer existed. My record speaks for itself," he muttered, but even he could hear how hollow it sounded. Roumie said nothing. He didn't gloat, he didn't lean forward. He simply sat back, hands clasped, gaze steady, a man at peace, having spoken the truth. The moment wasn't loud, it was clean and devastating. And as the cameras rolled on, it became clear to everyone in that studio, the audience, the moderator, the staff, they hadn't just witnessed a debate, they had witnessed a reckoning. Walsh, visibly shaken, reached for his water, his fingers trembling, his posture slouched. The man who had once thundered about weakness now looked like he was crumbling under the weight of accountability. Roumie remained still, like a judge after the final gavel, like a priest after a confession. The moderator gave Walsh one final opportunity. "Mr. Walsh, any closing thoughts?" Walsh tried to. "Well, I think governing is complex. People don't always understand the decisions leaders have to make. Sometimes you do things that..." He trailed off. It was the kind of vague politician speak that people say when they have nothing left. Roumie's final response was soft but unshakable. "Matt, the American people do understand. They understand the difference between sacrifice and spin, between leadership and showmanship, between hard decisions and convenient exits." A single nod. They're not asking for perfection, just honesty. And with that, it was over. Within minutes of the debate ending, the internet erupted. Clips of Roumie's calm dismantling of Walsh's contradictions flooded every platform. The most shared video, Roumie's question about the bridge to nowhere, followed by Walsh's stunned silence. The hashtag #Roumie reveals trended globally. Commentators on all sides scrambled to react. Conservative hosts struggled to defend Walsh, not because of bias, but because they couldn't refute a single fact. Progressive commentators called it a masterclass in moral clarity. On MSNBC, Rachel Maddow opened her segment with, "Tonight we didn't just witness a debate, we witnessed what it looks like when truth is delivered with grace." Jonathan Roumie showed us that you don't need volume to have power. You just need the facts and the courage to speak them with conviction. Even some Fox News analysts conceded Roumie's performance was undeniably effective, though they tried half-heartedly to suggest his tone was overly righteous. But the damage had been done. For Matt Walsh, it was a career-defining collapse. For Jonathan Roumie, it was something greater. It was a moment of public moral witness, a new blueprint for public discourse, where the one who doesn't yell ends up winning, where receipts replace rhetoric, and where grace, when rooted in truth, is the sharpest blade of all. Jonathan Roumie's calm, methodical dismantling of Matt Walsh's political persona left the commentator with few avenues for recovery. Within minutes, political analysts began to speculate that this wasn't just a momentary stumble for Walsh. It was potentially the end of his influence as a serious voice in conservative politics. His bluster, his brand, his bravado, all exposed as hollow under the steady light of truth. For years, Walsh had positioned himself as the guardian of moral clarity and common-sense conservatism. But Roumie's gentle interrogation didn't just challenge that identity, it unraveled it. And this time, there would be no soundbite to patch it together again. One veteran Republican strategist told Politico, Matt built his entire brand on calling out so-called hypocrisy in others. When someone like Jonathan Roumie calmly shows the world that he's the one who's been hiding behind contradictions, there's really no recovery from that. Meanwhile, for Jonathan Roumie, the debate was a watershed moment. In a single night, he went from being a respected figure in faith-based circles to being hailed as a model for a new kind of moral leadership, one rooted in truth, patience, and preparation. Political commentators across the spectrum began referencing his performance alongside other historic debate moments. But unlike those defined by volume or theatrics, Roumie stood out because of its silence, its certainty, and its refusal to degrade. Within hours, social media lit up. The hashtag #RoumieReveals dominated every major platform. Clips of him asking, "When did love for neighbor become something to mock?" were shared millions of times. Fundraising campaigns for civic engagement and truth in politics initiatives began quoting him directly. The impact reached beyond party lines. He had not attacked a political tribe. He had simply revealed a moral inconsistency and let the audience decide for themselves. Faith leaders, civil servants, and even some unexpected conservative voices praised Roumie for reminding the country that integrity isn't about who can shout loudest, but who can stand still the longest in front of uncomfortable truths. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow put it plainly, Jonathan Roumie didn't win with volume. He won with clarity. He didn't mock, interrupt, or insult. He didn't play politics. He simply held up a mirror, and Matt Walsh blinked first. Even on Fox News, anchors found themselves acknowledging the undeniable effectiveness of Roumie's performance, even as they struggled to reframe it as overly moralizing. But the audience had already seen what they needed to see. Walsh's collapse was no longer a partisan issue. It was a human one, and Roumie's presence had reminded the nation that public life doesn't have to be built on rage. It can be built on reverence, reflection, and reason. More than a debate, the confrontation had become a blueprint. In the weeks that followed, political strategists began to discuss the Roumie method, a quiet, precise, morally grounded approach to public discourse. It stood in stark contrast to the shouting matches and theatrical outrage that had defined politics for so long. What Jonathan Roumie did wasn't magic. It was discipline. He prepared. He listened. He spoke only when needed. And when he did, every word mattered. His performance reminded the nation of a simple truth. In an age of distraction, stillness is power. In an age of contradiction, consistency is clarity. And in an age of outrage, grace is revolutionary. As America continues to grapple with division, misinformation, and manufactured outrage, one thing is clear. Jonathan Roumie didn't just win a debate, he changed the standard. If this moment moved you, if you believe that truth, grace, and calm conviction still matter in public discourse, then you're in the right place. We break down the most powerful confrontations, the moments that reveal character, not just talking points. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next moment that changes everything. Because in a world full of noise, we focus on what truly speaks. Stay with us. The next revelation is just around the corner.